Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Steve Wilson, who chronicles a part of his life beginning at 9 years old when he went to a movie theater and unknowingly worked with a person who raped him. And that person, he thought he held in his confidence. This person chose to do what they did with him. Steve chronicles the fact that he kept all of this behind a mask, as he calls it. He did not express himself, but he went through many years of his life, more than 20 years, holding this back and going through depression. And it was late in life where he sought help. His mother finally figured out what was happening. But Marty, it's a matter of us, I think, in part, being willing to engage with people, be aware of some of those things that involve mental health. I'm not trying to in any way indicate we can replace therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and so forth, but it is, I think, a matter of us being aware and engaging in a person's life. What are some takeaways our listeners can gain from Steve?
Ron, I gained from Steve that there are many forms of mental health, and you don't know what has happened in a person's life. Just like Steve said, he was raped. There could be trauma. There could be a bad home life. When a person is going through mental health, they need to have the confidence in us that want to help, that they can trust us and they can open up and tell us. Also, the resources for mental health is just not out there as much as it should be, so that we can help these people.
And Marty, I think that's very well expressed. Trust to be a safe space, but know where this person can seek additional, more thorough help. Let's listen and learn from Steve, and most importantly, let's engage in a person's life. Steve, it's great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to learn a lot from your life background of childhood abuse. It's a very overarching term, but you have recovered from that. You've had some pretty significant life experiences, and our listeners can benefit from how you recovered from that. And you've been a very successful person, I'll say, in spite of the background, but you've learned how to overcome. Steve, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Ron. You too, Marty.
Thank you.
Steve, can you give our listeners just kind of a top-level summary of what the background has been, what you've had to overcome?
Well, in 1958, I was 9 years old. I went to a movie theater. The person who I thought worked in the theater came up and said he needed my help. took me into the restroom and raped me. I didn't have a clue what had happened. I didn't know why it happened. I didn't know it could happen. But all I know is I was shamed, and for some reason I thought it was my fault. Nobody knew, and I didn't tell anybody for 30 years. I went about my life, and about 2 or 3 months later, I was hit with my first clinical depression, in which I didn't have any feeling. I didn't care for anybody. I was sure nobody cared for me. I didn't associate with my friends. My grades went to hell. And that lasted 2 or 3 months. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know where it came from. But what I found out was that it comes in waves. In other words, it'll last, whatever the person who's suffering from it, whatever their schedule is, that's kind of like how it works. So the depression hit me for a couple of months, and then it went away for however long it's scheduled to go away, and I got back to normal. But then it would hit again. So I was in 4th grade when I was raped. 7th grade, it hit me again pretty badly. And then it hit me again, 9th grade, and throughout high school. I couldn't sleep. I faked everything. Nobody knew I was suffering. I was very well liked, had a lot of friends, but at the end of the day, I was not in good shape. Then I graduated from college. I came home and eventually had to go into the psychiatric hospital for 3 weeks. 1972, they diagnosed me with clinical depression, gave me a bunch of medications, none of which work. 6 years later, they said they made a mistake, told me I was bipolar. I had no idea what the hell bipolar was, but they gave me lithium, and that started me on the road to recovery. Now, wasn't total recovery by any means, 50% maybe, but at least I was able to live again.
I'm processing, Steve, you were, oh my goodness, 50 years or something of 40, 50 of experiencing some sort of shame. Maybe what did I do to cause this? I don't talk about it and so forth. Am I processing that correctly?
Well, there is one difference. I shut it completely out of my mind. The day I walked into that theater is a day I closed off that incident. But the incident plus whatever else causes bipolar merged together, and from there on out, it was downhill all the way.
All right. So you're bipolar, and I think of that as manic or you're high, you're low. Did you churn through your mind of what went on and that kind of thing? I guess what I'm trying to do, Steve, is surmise what all went on. Ultimately, you chose to get over this, through a doctor's help or something of that nature?
Well, first of all, let me explain what bipolar is. There are 2 types of bipolar. One is bipolar 1. It is the one where you get depressed, and then you can go into a full-blown mania. And when that happens, you spend all your money. You think you're the greatest person in the world. You think you can accomplish anything. And when you turn around and you crash back down into depression, you look around and your life is totally a disaster. You may lose your family, you spend all your money, whatever. I was never in mania. My type was bipolar 2, which is the deep, deep lows. And if I tried to explain to you how I felt, you wouldn't even come close to gathering in what I'm talking about. It is the worst feeling you can have. It has suicidal thoughts all the time. It has a feeling of being worthless, want to die, all the components that we as normal people, if there is such a thing, can't even begin to conjure up what it means.
Was there a point in your life when you realized I just cannot continue the way I am? Did you seek professional help? Is that what it was that put you on the lithium, Steve?
Yes, my mother, after me suffering through this for 20 years, finally figured it out that something was wrong. So she got me a psychiatrist, and that was the beginning that I started getting better because I had one-on-one therapy. Now, remember, I started therapy in 1970. I didn't get the classification of bipolar for 8 more years. So for those 8 years, let's just put it briefly, I was in the toilet. Nothing worked, nothing helped. During those 8 years, I got jobs and lost them pretty regularly. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. And I'd get a job. The guy would fire me. I'd quit. I'd yell at him, all these things out of control. And then I got the lithium, and that part of me went away. And during that time, 70 to 78, I was at my worst. And that's when I was thinking of suicide all the time. But I never tried.
You went through several years of believing you are valueless, worthless. I'm not sure why I even exist. Is that
Right.
somewhat accurate?
Yes.
Wow.
The thought that crosses the mind of people who are having suicidal ideations really gets down to the fact that if I do this, kill myself, all my loved ones, all my friends will be better off. And it's the best thing I can do for me.
I need to ask you, Steve, and this is a lot of what our podcast is about. Would it have been somewhat easy for a person to know there's something wrong, but maybe the listener who may think, Steve, you need clinical help well beyond what I can provide you, and some people may avoid you, whereas could a person reach out to you and just show friendship and help you that way? I'm trying to stimulate our listeners to engage with people as with the thoughts that you have, Steve.
Well, one of the things that I did not have my first 20 some years was a support system. And that is vitally important. And that doesn't mean you come and tell me what to do or the guy who's is suffering. It means that you show him friendship, love, understanding, but you don't get mixed up in telling him how to feel better, like go take a walk. So many people do that. And it just drives the sufferer down even further. Problem is, not many people know how to handle the situation, and they've never been taught what to expect from a guy or girl who's with bipolar disorder. So they're completely freaked out. And in some instances, which I have found out through the groups that I facilitate, their parents have thrown their kid out of the house, or their wife has told them, I can't stand you anymore, go away. They take it personally. Well, the guy or girl isn't trying to be personal. They're just suffering so badly, they don't know any other way to live.
Is there an aspect, Steve, of us accepting and adapting to you, spending more time listening than talking?
Well, I'll tell you this, the stigma against any type of mental illness is still terrible around the world. I want to give you, for instance here, 20% of Americans suffer from some type of mental illness. That's 66 million people. It isn't as if you say, we stay away from that guy because he's the only one who's going through this. They're all over the place. Instead of shunning them, people should be out trying to help. Do things to wake up our government. The government isn't doing a damn thing for mentally ill people other than the minimum. The insurance companies, they won't help at all. They try to, for instance, I told you I do these 2 support groups every week. To watch them try to get the proper professional help is unbelievable because the insurance companies have so regulated themselves to be telling doctors that they're not going to, that their premiums are going to be so high that the doctors can't make any money. They won't cover most people who have insurance. So if you're a guy or girl like I have in my groups, most of them from the age of 18 to 80, and from a lower income level, they can't find any help. They can't afford it. And the government responds is to provide them with clinics, provide them with some housing, but it's so inadequate it isn't even funny. If a person from my group is suffering and he goes to a clinic to find some help, they have to be deemed disabled and goes to a clinic for help, and they're really suffering at the moment, and they're lucky enough to get an appointment. Well, the clinics are so understaffed and so overwhelmed that they might not get in for another 3 weeks or a month. Well, if they're really bad, they need that next appointment the next day. And then when they come back, their doctor may have quit, may have been sent someplace else. So it's very inadequate. I blame the government on this. They try to tell everybody how they think about it. They don't do anything. They do the minimum. So you put together the government and the insurance industry and anybody who can't afford a couple $100 per session is left out in the cold.
Talk to us about a support group. Can a listener become a part of a support group? Do we need a special training certification to participate in a support group?
I found my support group by answering an ad in a magazine or a newspaper here in Phoenix. And I applied, I went through the training. One of the prerequisites is that you are a peer. You have to have suffered from some mental illness. When we did all that, I was hired, but not paid. It's strictly volunteer, and I've been doing it for 8 years, and I love everything about it. And it is an avenue where people who have trouble getting help, they can at least come to our group, realize they are not alone, and listen to stories and realize that other people are suffering not the same thing they're suffering from, but like them. My group is called Tope here in Phoenix, and we have about 10 groups, of which I do 2. If a person wanted to find out where they can get a group in their area, because mine is only in Phoenix, they can get online and look up mental health support groups, and that's where they can find them. And I always say that the best place to look is an institution called NAMI, NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. They can plug you into what support groups might be available in your area.
Talk to us a little bit more in depth about mental illness. I was at an earlier age, I really thought that mental health and mental illness, let's say mental deficiency, were all synonymous, but I think I've become more aligned with mental health being more along of the way we think, positive or negative thoughts kind of thing. But can you address mental health from a little bit different or better perspective, Steve? Because I think there are, well, like you said, there are a lot of statistically 66 million people suffering from some degree of mental health. And there may be even a listener who needs mental health support, but they don't even think of themselves as needing it.
The way I look at it is most people I've run across think of mental illness as what you were describing earlier in your life, that it is somebody else's problem. And I'm not going to get messed up in it because I don't see how they're suffering. See, mental health problems are invisible. It's not like somebody has a heart attack. You can see what's happened. But in mental illness, it's all in your head. There are all kinds of, there's borderline, there's clinical depression, there's bipolar, there's schizophrenia. There's so many of them, and they're all different, but in many ways, they're all the same. I wrote a book called Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. Been out about a year. The whole reason for writing the book was to show those of us who have mental illness that if they follow the treatment plan, hopefully they can get one, they can have a good life and maybe be very successful, even though most mental illnesses, like bipolar, are not curable. So it's my intention to get the word out as much as I can, because I see so many people who, in my groups especially, give up. They don't know where to turn. Nobody's there to help them, except for maybe from my group. And there's another thing, medication. Everybody thinks, oh, they're on meds. They're a bad person. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. But the reality is that the medication for mental illness only helps about 50% of those suffering. So where do the other 50% go? Well, it's a closely guarded secret, because you can't find out about it unless you're astute online or you've been to a therapist who might let you in on it. But for so many people, they don't find out. There's EMDR, there's behavioral therapy, there's ketamine, there's all these things out there that instead of medication, you can get help with. In many instances, they're expensive. Ketamine can be as much as $500, slight mistake, per treatment. And their treatments only last a few weeks, and then you got to do them again. If you go to these other treatments, they'll teach you ways in which you can cope with the things on your mind. And one of the big things is called rumination, and your mind just goes crazy. If you do something to make somebody feel bad, you'll think, oh my God, I ruined his life, I ruined it. And it just goes round and around. In these special areas, they can teach you how to overcome those thoughts, or at least lessen them. For many people, they think that medication is going to be the answer, but it's not always that way.
Are you cured of your past, your depressive thoughts and so forth? And included in that question, Steve, do you periodically have flashbacks that cause you to ruminate and the like, or do you just know how to handle everything now?
Well, there is no cure, as I said before. So you got to get that in your mind, that I've got to try to beat this every day. What I've gotten to is that I got each person in my group that I know of who's on medication is not on just one medication. They have a cocktail. One person in my group is on 10 pills. I'm on 4. And when I got the last one, it halted about 80% of the ruminations. Now, I still have bad days. I still have days where I'm so impulsive that I'll go out and do something stupid and throw my money away. I once bought a car because my wife bought a car. I thought I should have one. And that's kind of stuff that goes on. But I still get plagued by that stuff. I don't think there's ever going to change.
So you've learned to deal with the way things are, it sounds, Steve, and I don't want to oversimplify or misdiagnose anything, but you've learned to deal with your situation, but it's almost daily that you're having to manage your situation. I think I'm trying to think of the right words.
Well, it's not almost daily. Many days are perfect, but I never know when it's going to come. It's kind of like what I told you in the beginning. You're on a schedule that you are on. Well, mine is lessened, but it still comes on every once in a while. One of the big reasons the mental illness is so high in the United States, and by the way, when I do these podcasts, I do them from different places in the world, and the same statistics practically are identical in other countries. It's not just a USA problem, it's a worldwide problem. One of the big factors is people think nothing's wrong with them, or they just downright want to handle it on their own. They're not going to get help. And they never do, and they get worse and worse and worse. The suicide rate is up so high that it's crazy. 1 in 4 students in the United States are mentally ill for whatever reason. Before I started with my support groups, I was speaking on 2 high school classes about teenage depression. And the reason I did that was because I owned a clothing store in Ohio, a really good one, big. Every year at Christmas, we would hire these young girls or guys from high school or junior high to wrap packages and run errands and stuff like that. This one year, I hired a little girl, about 16 years old, had everything going for her. Cute, smart, good athlete. One Saturday morning, her best friend came in and told me she had gone to bed the night before and pulled out a gun, shot herself in the head, 16 years old. Right before that, I had friends about 100 miles from me who I went to college with. He and I would keep in touch. Since then, we've lost touch, but we did up until then. He was telling me about his son, 16 years old, was depressed. They didn't know what to do with him. One day he broke into a house and the police caught him. Police called my friend, said, come down and get him. They came down, got out of the car. He got out of the squad car, said, Mom, Dad, I love you, but I can't take it anymore, and shot himself in the head. Then I started looking into how bad it is for kids. And with all the stuff we got going on in the world and every other problem, it's astronomical. Suicide rates for kids are up out of sight. I used to, when I talk to these high school classes, I used to, at the end of the day, I would say, anybody who wants to come up and talk to me about it, feel free. One day a girl came up. She was popular girl in the school, the highest grades, best athlete. She said, Mr. Wilson, I don't know what to do. I am under so much pressure to succeed by my parents, my teachers, my friends. They want me to go to this college or that college. They're basing their whole lives on what I do. I can't take it anymore. I don't ever know what happened to that girl. I gave her the information about a child psychologist, but I don't know what happened. One of the next girls who came up was just an ordinary student, probably a C or B student. She said, Mr. Wilson, I have no friends. My parents hate me. I want to die. I want to run away. I never saw her again, but I told her she needed to get help. But that's just the tip of the iceberg that's going on in these schools. And that can go back to kids 10 years old. People in the media, people in the governments bring up what's going on, but they never do a damn thing about it. Teachers are woefully underschooled about what to do with these problems. If you ever get a chance, or any of your listeners get a chance to see the series, I think it was on Netflix, called 13 Reasons Why. I don't know if you've ever heard about it, but it's about a high school student. From the beginning, she kills herself, but they follow for a season or two what she went through and how little help she got, even though she was begging for it. What can you say? It's a sad state of affairs. It is, in my mind, tops the general physical ailments of what is going on every place, because there's so many more people who have these problems.
Our experience is we at least sense some people mask their depression and they hide it by being superior athletes, academics, speaking, the whatever. But sometimes it's in the quiet moments that they just want to hide and maybe allow themselves to just have very deceptive, deep thinking, negative thoughts that can lead to some very fatal decisions. But Steve, is it your experience that some people mask their inner feelings? We just need to be very perceptive of listening to and maybe being aware of some of those things people can say that lead us to think you need help.
I wore a mask for 20 years. Nobody knew but me. My parents didn't know, my sister didn't know, my brother didn't know, my best friends didn't know. And I'm going to tell you, every time I talk about a mask in my groups, almost all of them say, what do you think I've been doing for the last X amount of years? One of the big reasons for that is the humiliation of people finding out that they're mentally struggling. Across the world, mental illness is something to be shunned. It may be better, we say, than when I was in real trouble in the 60s and 70s. Today, it's a long way from good.
If we discern through conversation that we may have uncovered, exposed, maybe is a better term, expose the mask, and we discern that a person may be having depressive thoughts, do I need to be certified to work with that person further? Or Steve, is it more of a matter I need to be more caring? Is maybe the best certification. If I care, I'll work with that person so that I can prove myself to be a safe space so they feel free to talk with me about it.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at that. One, you have to get a degree, and if you're going to issue any medication, you have to be a psychiatrist. If you're going to be a psychologist, you have to either get a master's or a PhD. But there are so many avenues to where people can get involved. Ministers can get involved. People who people look up to and say, boy, I trust that guy and I want to talk to him. If you're a coach or a counselor and the kids trust you, talk to them. Don't shut them out. There's just so many ways to help people, but you got to be understanding. That's the whole thing. You can't be critical. You just got to let them know you're there to hear their story. And if you can, you'll help them. And then the other thing you need to do is know the resources in your area that can give a kid who comes to you with problems, push him towards that right person.
And I think the message, Steve, for many of our listeners is when we care, we'll listen, and we can prove ourselves to be a safe space. As we care, we'll know the phone numbers, we'll know the people with whom they can get more specialized care, but we can reach out to and just be a listening post, if I can use that term, for the person who might, at this point in their life, just need somebody who feels they can speak with them, understand them, adapt to them. I use the term frequently, accept. And if you accept me, then maybe we can talk a little bit and maybe you can steer me in the direction I need to go. And I don't want to oversimplify it, Steve, but that's just some of my thoughts.
Well, I think they're very good, but be aware of this. No matter what your good intentions are, these kids or these adults aren't going to say, okay, I'm ready to do what you say. It may take you a year to get through to them. They may see you that first time and say, oh, thanks, and not come back for 6 months. Unless you can get them to somewhere to get medication or get these other remedies, you've just got to let them, you can't force them. Let's put it that way. You've got to let them come to you or whatever therapist there is because they want to, not because you want them to.
Is it a matter of being willing to work with that person as however long it takes and just being willing to reach out, listen to, and be available for that person? Is that part of it?
Yes, and you have to realize they may not respond until they hit the bottom. And you never know when that bottom's going to come. For me, it came in 1971. I'll never forget it. That's when I really reached out for help. And then when you get them to reach out to you, it may take 10 years for them to respond well to it. So it's a long-term process for the therapist and the sufferer at the same time.
Steve, on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for your recovery. Maybe that's a better term, is a journey of where you've been and what you're dealing with, and the support leader you are for others who are going through troubled times. It's important for our listeners to engage, be willing to work with those, understand, as you said, it's not going to be a one conversation turnaround. It's likely going to be a long process, and this person may have to go several months, years before they hit rock bottom. And
Right.
Steve, thank you for everything that you are and everything you are passing forward from your life experience. On behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for everything that you are passing forward. We wanted to encourage our listeners to engage in other people's lives and help people through whatever depression they may be experiencing.
Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure working with you guys.
Thank you, Steve. We look forward to continuing your life journey.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.